Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about the Nintendo Switch 2 because it appears some very exciting news has just happened that has strong implications for when the system will be coming out sometime in the first half of 2025 it appears, and perhaps even a reveal in this calendar year, along with some other details that have surfaced from other places as well. And so that's what we're getting into today. But before going forward, let me ask that if you do enjoy my content, to please subscribe and hit that notification bell. So last night, we got this article written by reporter Zoe Peiyu from Money DJ, a Taiwanese financial management network, and here they say, looking forward to the market outlook in the field of power management IC, Lin Chongtao said that the game console application orders have rebounded since the third quarter, including the introduction and shipment of new models of PS5, Xbox, and Switch. And that's it. That's the big news. The introduction of shipment of new models of PS5, Xbox, and Switch in this upcoming quarter. This is huge. So we already know about the new Xbox, and everyone expects the PS5 Pro to be announced next month. But a introduction and new model of a Switch? What might that be? This report right here is essentially suggesting that Nintendo's going to go into the manufacturing for what we believe is the Nintendo Switch 2. But how is that a big deal? Well, recently, a lot of the conversation regarding Nintendo Switch 2 and when it's going to come out is after March 2025, after Nintendo's fiscal year, which ends March 2025, meaning April at the earliest. And this has led some people to start thinking, oh, it's not even going to be coming out early 2025, but perhaps late into 2025. And even if it ends up somehow coming out in early 2025 still, because it's been pushed at least a month or so based off people's expectations from earlier this year, then even a reveal of the console before this calendar year is up seems less likely. Now, the one thing we do know for sure is that Nintendo will be providing some sort of announcement regarding the successor to the Switch before the end of the fiscal year, so before the end of March 2025. Some people like to entertain the possibility that this announcement would just be another Twitter announcement, but the very announcement that Nintendo would be doing something like this was already a Twitter announcement. So personally, I think it's extremely unlikely that they will be announcing months in advance a tweet. I think more likely this announcement is essentially the announcement of the console, the name and all, with actual details, kind of like the Nintendo Switch 1, where we had that first look trailer where we saw games, we saw the console was 3.5 minutes long. I think something like that is what the announcement is going to be. That seems to be the most likely scenario. But with these recent conversations of the Switch 2 not coming out March 2025, that seems to break the speculation that Switch 2 will be following a similar format to Switch 1, where we have a big teaser in October of 2016, and then a big presentation showing off everything January of 2017, and then the actual release early March 2017. But not even a week ago, we were discussing a rumor from another reporter from Brazil, going by the name of PH Brazil, that has discussed in one of their more recent podcasts that several presentations that were supposed to be happening in September have been moved up to the next few weeks. And they went into some speculation that they think Switch 2 could be getting announced soon, and they feel it will be following a similar format to Switch 1. And something else we have been discussing as of late is that something similar to Switch 1 isn't necessarily exactly the same thing, a reveal in October, a presentation in January, and a release in March. Give or take a month or two, there could be some fluctuation here. So coming back to this report about manufacturing starting in the next quarter, this bodes extremely well. For both the release in the first half of next year, maybe still possibly March, just because some venues are reporting that some developers haven't heard about a March release. That doesn't totally outright guarantee it won't be happening. But then also, if it's going into manufacturing, many think that it makes sense for Nintendo to beat the leaks before they happen and just provide the proper messaging on the console first. Because once manufacturing starts, once they're putting these consoles together on the assembly line, putting it in the boxes and all, there will be people doing this. There will be people that can take pictures and then share that online, or just talk about it anonymously online, thus leaking details on the console before Nintendo's provided their own proper messaging that they've been so patient on providing all this time. I think it will be really unfortunate if we enter a scenario where Nintendo has been so quiet about this console, so secretive, in an effort to provide messaging in the way they want and the timing they want, only for leaks to happen ahead of that. So basically, because of this, many think that once Nintendo actually starts manufacturing, they're going to have a proper announcement and reveal of the console. Something like that first teaser we had for Nintendo Switch 1. So if Nintendo is operating in this way, then it would mean that we're probably going to get a reveal before the end of October, potentially even sooner. And while the release of the console may not be March this time around, it doesn't seem to be too far off. April or May still seem to be pretty reasonable months for the system to release, and perhaps the extra bit of time between reveal and release this time around might be because Nintendo wants to start manufacturing with a bit more time before release. That way, they have a lot more stock prepared to meet demand. The demand this time around is going to likely be greater than what it was for Switch in the beginning, because now people know what the Switch is all about. Nintendo doesn't have to earn the credibility of the masses to have as many people buying the system. And this is something Nintendo's talked about during their investor Q&As to combat scalping. They'll be able to meet demand, and the scalping issue of some people buying multiple Switch 2s and selling it online for exorbitant prices won't be as much of an issue. It's likely going to happen regardless. This is how it is for all new systems. But they are trying to minimize that, and of course also coming out with all that momentum and excitement right in the beginning with even more consoles leads to an even stronger start. So from both perspectives, they definitely would want to do something like this if they can. And it's interesting considering things from this perspective, because when we go back to 2016, Nintendo was in more of a rush to bring out the Nintendo Switch because of the failing Wii U, and while the 3DS was relatively successful compared to their prior handhelds, not that much. So they definitely wanted to bring out the Switch as soon as possible. That's why the Wii U had a short lifespan. So this all makes sense, but to add a little bit more to this breakdown here, we got another interesting article written by Hideki Yasuda, a financial analyst, and here they answer the question to if the successor to the Switch would stimulate inbound demand. Their response? At this point, no details have been announced about the successor to the Switch, but various reports suggest that it will be released in the first half of next year, will be relatively cheap in dollar terms, less than $4.99 USD, and will have performance that is lower than the PlayStation 4 Pro. Now, these details here are relative ballparks, and it is believed that this analyst has inside information, and they're not just pulling this based off what they think and just what they see online. And they talk about Switch 2 coming out in the first half of next year. That seems to be the common sentiment for most insiders, leakers, reporters, analysts, all of them. But also here they discuss this pricing of $4.99 USD, at most. Many people have been thinking, myself included, that the Switch 2, that sweet spot price point would likely be $399.99, essentially $400 USD. When you look at the pricing for the current Switch models, how old is that $350 essentially, we assume that's going to get a price drop, but then still Switch 2 would be more expensive. When you account for inflation and how the Switch came out initially at $300 back in 2017, this is actually pretty much in line. But here there's some discussion about the possibility of basically a $500 price point. How could we get there? Well, what if there's multiple SKUs here? What if there is a other version of the Switch 2, there's two different versions, one that's more expensive? Our friend Paul Gale put out some speculation. This is not a leak necessarily, it's just their opinion on a way Nintendo could handle things if there was more than one price, would be to have the Switch 2 without a dock, and the Switch 2 with a dock, and then a dock being sold on its own. And this would kind of be like a Switch Lite Switch situation, except in this case, you can still dock the console. And it wouldn't be a smaller version of the Switch, but the same version. Imagine if you were able to buy just a Switch with the Joy-Cons and no dock at launch, and it would have been cheaper. You can do that, but if later down the road you have the money and you want to be able to play in docked TV mode, you can buy the dock separately. I think something like this would actually work pretty well, and it might be an interesting strategy to facilitate the Switch 2 having more of a wide-reaching price point. There are a lot of people that typically only play in portable mode, and while I also think a lot of people would regret not being able to play in docked mode if they have the option to eventually upgrade, I think this actually makes a lot of sense. So I think it's a really good point made by Paul Gale. Maybe this could tie into this idea of a higher price point here. What if Switch 2 launches at $450, but you can buy just the portable version for $350? That might look really good when Nintendo's been selling the OLED for the last few years at $350 as well. Now, there's also mention by this analyst of power under a PS4 Pro. There's been a lot of conversation about this, but I think raw power wouldn't really be taking into account all the new bells and whistles, the new technology in the console, DLSS, as we've discussed many times before. These different elements would help push the system into what I believe would be an overall visual impact range at the low end of current gen consoles like Xbox Series S. But even if it falls a little bit short of that, if it's at least close, if it's at least in the ballpark and measures up closer to the current gen consoles than what Switch does to prior gen, then I think we're going to be in pretty good territory, especially when we account for the fact of diminishing returns. So I think things will be fine. But anyways, with this report of production starting in Q3 for these different Nintendo systems, if this new Nintendo system that's going to production this next quarter is indeed the Nintendo Switch 2, then we are in pretty good shape here, and the next generation of Nintendo will be discussed publicly, officially, very soon. Which I think is great to hear considering all the conversations that have happened this last week putting that into question. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care.